place a 70% increase in our defense spending over a 9-year period beginning in 2017. We are also bringing forward a package to modernize NATO, which will be a contributor towards the 2%. And we are also putting ships in the water and procuring other items as well, including an Arctic offshore patrol vessel, for example, that recently circumnavigated North America, and we are in the process of procuring 88 fighter jets. All in all, we are responding to the overall threat environment, and we will continue to work with our NATO allies to make sure that we are doing so.
And Minister, finally, you just mentioned the Arctic. You're taking part in these exercises with the U.S. up there. We've got all sorts of good pictures of that. But Canada and Russia are competitors up there, and global warming is making it very hotly contested for shipping, for natural resources, etc. You know, a long time ago, in 1987, President Gorbachev called it a zone of peace. Do you think that's still the case, or is this going to be hotly contested?
One of the issues I discussed with Secretary Austin this morning, in fact, was the importance of Arctic sovereignty and the importance of modernizing NORAD, which is something that we are both committed to, and in particular, putting forward an over-the-horizon surveillance system is one of the important aspects that we both committed to our countries, that is, in August 2021.
Minister Anand, thank you so much indeed for joining us. As we said, President Zelensky has made repeated requests for a no-fly zone and more fighter jets, most recently in his address to German lawmakers. But as Fred Fleitgen reports, Ukraine has been able to hold Moscow back through other means.
This is how Ukraine's army is halting Russia's advance, using anti-aircraft weapons like the U.S.-made Stinger against low-flying helicopters. Now, answering Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's plea, the U.S. says longer-range anti-aircraft missiles are arriving in Ukraine, including the powerful S-300.
You know what kind of defense systems we need, S-300s and other similar systems. You know how much depends on the battlefield on Russia's ability to use aircraft.
After Zelensky's impassioned speech to Congress, President Biden announced a massive new security assistance package worth $800 million, including drones, anti-tank weapons, and 20 million rounds of ammunition.
It includes 800 anti-aircraft systems to make sure the Ukrainian military can continue to stop the planes and helicopters that have been attacking their people and to defend their Ukrainian airspace.
Despite being drastically outgunned, Ukraine's forces have been putting up a tough fight. The country's ground troops, led by Colonel General Alexander Syrskyi, a veteran of Ukraine's defense of the Donbas region. Meanwhile, the chief commander of the armed forces, General Valery Zaluzhny, who's widely credited with reforming Ukraine's military, vows to fight the Russians to the last drop of blood. I don't have any illusions and don't wait for a gift from God, he says. I fought and have been preparing my armed forces. The weapons supplied by the U.S. and its allies are giving them a fighting chance. Ukrainian units blowing up Russian tanks with shoulder-fired missiles like the Javelin supplied by the U.S. or NLAWS, a similar anti-tank weapon made in Britain.
We're at a crucial point in the battle here where Ukraine is tipping the balance against Russia. Russia's truly in trouble.
Ukrainian troops have fought tooth and nail with Russian tanks on the ground despite being massively outgunned by Vladimir Putin's army. While the U.S. and NATO still reject the idea of a no-fly zone, the Biden administration has made clear it will continue to arm Kiev's forces to help as they bog down the Russian military and inflict massive casualties.
And it is that resistance that has galvanized so much of the world and so much support for Ukraine that Fleitgen reporting there. And as president of Ukraine, my next guest started turning the nation towards the West, responding to the people's demands for closer ties with the West. Viktor Yushchenko was elected in the Orange Revolution of 2004, but it did nearly cost him his life as he had beaten Vladimir Putin's hand-picked candidate. after his inauguration, he was struggling to recover from a terrible poisoning, dioxin, that also scarred his face. Mr. President, do you know who did this to you specifically?
I have no doubt this was done by my opponents in the government. That's who will benefit the most from my death.
But President Putin's role during the election remains controversial. He openly backed the hand-picked successor of the previous regime, coming to Kiev twice to lend his support. One of your most important world neighbors is obviously Russia. President Putin supported your opponent during the election. How do you reconcile with him?
I'll give him my hand and say, Vladimir Vladimirovich, let's forget the past and think of the future.
Last week, he did just that, greeting President Putin on his first trip abroad since his inauguration.
Everyone now understands that only Ukrainians have the right to choose Ukraine's president. Our president is not elected in Moscow or anywhere else.
It is actually amazing to look back in history and see how the Ukrainians were open to good and better relations with Putin's Russia. Now, Mr. Yushchenko believes even now that NATO should have welcomed Ukraine when he asked for it back in 2008. It would have stopped Putin's aggression, he told me, when we spoke again earlier this week. President Viktor Yushchenko, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, we met a very long time ago, shortly after your election, in what we call the Orange Revolution. Around that time, you said to the Ukrainian people, we are free. The old era is over. We are a new country now. With Russian tanks in Ukraine, with shelling of Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv, is that old era over, or are we back right in the middle of it?
When we met in 2005, that was the moment when the Ukrainian nation chose the Ukrainian path, the European path. This was our great occasion, and this was a time that a many Ukrainian generation strove for, and that was our great victory. Today, we are at a point where the Russian president is trying to correct us. He's saying we're going the wrong way, we're building the wrong life, wrong society, and wrong nation. But I think these are hollow words. We have our own life, we have a clear choice, and we will never surrender, not to Putin, not to Russia.
Mr. President, it must be very painful to see what's happening to your country. You say you will never surrender. President Zelensky says the nation will never surrender. And we hear so many people saying they will never surrender and they'll fight till the death. But we also know that negotiations are going on. President Zelensky has said, again, no to NATO. It is clear that Ukraine will not be joining NATO anytime soon. Do you agree with what he's saying? And how do you think a negotiated settlement